Here's the answer to question 3 of the short answer assignment. So this question is about deflation, and you are asked to explain why the Reserve Bank of Australia doesn't seek to engineer deflation. That is, a fall in the general level of prices in the economy. If the Reserve Bank were to engineer deflation, it would do so by significantly increasing interest rates, increasing the cost of borrowing money for the purposes of expenditure. By increasing interest rates substantially, this would crush investment expenditure, consumption expenditure, and perhaps net export expenditure. By doing that, you get an overall decrease in the level of aggregate demand. Firms will respond to that by cutting production, sacking workers, or retrenching workers. And it will also mean, because firms will now face lower marginal costs in a competitive market environment, they will cut their prices as well, and thereby generating deflation. So deflation here is an effect. But along the way, what you get is substantial negative effects. So a fall in real GDP, incomes, higher unemployment. So we would hardly say that this is a desirable outcome. The Reserve Bank of Australia has no interest in causing a recession as a general rule. So that's one reason alone why the Reserve Bank doesn't seek to engineer deflation. But in addition to that, deflation can also have an undesirable causal role on a credit-reliant economy. So not only is it can it be an effect with some very undesirable additional effects that go with that, but after it has been engineered, it can then go on to cause further undesirable outcomes. So what are they? First, the real debt burden. Investment and consumption expenditure can decrease even further than initially because of deflation. So once deflation has been instituted, that itself can then go on to have a knock-on effect on investment and consumption spending. Why? Because deflation increases the real debt burdens of borrowers. So you have businesses who will have borrowed money, and you will have households who have borrowed money. In the case of deflation, for both of these groups, these indebted groups, their real debt burden rises. And when that occurs, it's possible in the case of businesses that they will curtail future investments that they were planning. And for households, they will perhaps curtail their consumption plans for the future as well. Indeed, you might have bankruptcies occurring because the real debt burdens for businesses and households have increased. So what exactly do we mean by real debt burden here? I'll just give you an example of that. We'll take the case of, say, a business. Let's say you've got a business and you owe $40,000 in repayments per year on a business loan. And let's say you sell 4,000 units of whatever it is that your business produces at $10 each per year. So your income stream for the year is $40,000. Your debt stream relative to your income is going to be the $40,000 over the $40,000. Or your debt burden is 100%. Let's now say that deflation occurs at the rate of 20%. So the general level of prices throughout the economy falls by 20%. And let's say that applies to your business as well. So the price of the product that you're selling falls from $10 to $8. Let's say that you can continue to sell the same 4,000 units as before. Consumers don't switch over to something cheaper because everything has fallen by 20%. Now your income stream is going to be $32,000. So your debt stream relative to your income stream per year will now be $40,000 over $32,000. Or in other words, your debt burden has increased from 100% to 125%. You haven't borrowed any more money. You're continuing to pay off your loan. But nonetheless, the debt burden has increased, and it is increased because of deflation. Okay, so you can see how, assuming all other things remain equal, this can be quite problematic for a business. You could see how this could put in jeopardy the business, or if deflation were substantially larger than this is going to put the business in serious jeopardy and may go bankrupt. And you can apply pretty much the same story to a household where you've got an income stream in terms of wages, for example. In that case, we would say that the wages would be falling as well. Okay, so the real debt burden for the household would increase because the debt doesn't change, but the income stream falls because of deflation. There's also the issue of expectations. Deflation encourages households to postpone their consumption expenditure, at least temporarily anyway, where they'll switch from consumption spending to saving if they expect that prices will continue to fall further in the future. You're not going to go and buy another car now if deflation is occurring and you expect that deflation to continue. Rather, you'll wait a while and buy a car at a later date, or a refrigerator, or a washing machine, or diamond rings, or whatever. So the postponement of consumption expenditure due to deflation, similarly, through the multiplier effect, causes a downward spiral in production and employment. Fall in consumption expenditure, fall in aggregate demand for goods and services leads to firms responding by cutting production, sacking some workers. So this further contributes to the downturn in the economy, if it were to be crazily engineered by the Reserve Bank. Then there's the last problem from the perspective of the Reserve Bank of Australia, that monetary policy may become ineffective. In particular, if interest rates are already low, then expansionary monetary policy to try and stimulate the economy may become ineffective. Expansionary monetary policy here would be, you say, well, we need to boost aggregate demand for goods and services, we need to try and encourage investment spending, for example, so we'll cut interest rates. The problem is, if this is occurring in a deflationary environment, where we've had the other effects we've just seen, then cutting interest rates when they're already low might not stimulate investment and consumption expenditure growth at all. I mean, why would a firm borrow money, even at very low interest rates? Why would they borrow money for investment in new factories if the future doesn't look particularly rosy? Right? If households are cutting their consumption spending for the products that they're producing, why would they build another factory? Equally, from the perspective of households, why would they borrow more money for consumption, even if it is at lower interest rates, if one is experiencing or is fearful of unemployment in the future? It would not seem to be a sensible path to follow for a rational household. So, cutting interest rates in this kind of environment might not stimulate investment and consumption expenditure at all. Monetary policy would become ineffective. And in the most extreme case, if the Reserve Bank if interest rates were extremely low and it cut them down to zero, and it didn't have much of an effect, as we just suggested, where do they go from there? They can't cut interest rates below zero, in which case they're trapped, so to speak. Monetary policy becomes entirely ineffective in this case. The Reserve Bank would not seek to engineer an environment in which their one lever by which they can attempt to manipulate the fortunes of the economy is rendered inoperative. So, for all of these reasons, the Reserve Bank of Australia does not, and in all likelihood would never, seek to engineer a deflationary economic environment.